Claire.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Great. Thanks for asking. How was your weekend?
It was really good. Yeah,
Awesome.
it was good. How about you?
Yeah, last days of summer in New Jersey, so we're enjoying. Can't
Mhm.
complain.
Nice, nice.
Where are you
Yeah,
guys
thank you so
located?
much. I personally am located in Cape Town, so we
Ah,
actually
okay.
are our winter is ending and we're going into spring. Um,
Okay.
yeah,
Wow.
our team is all over the world, which is really nice because we can work from where we want. But yeah, thank you so much for agreeing to meet with me today. It really is such a pleasure.
Likewise. No, I like these opportunities because it's a great way to connect with prospective students and chat about admissions and learn from
Definitely.
each other. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And I'm sure that what we will talk about today will be so helpful to the students who will listen to this podcast in the future.
Hope so.
Yeah, and to give you a little bit of like a background again on our organization and just this podcast in general.
Sure.
So the organization is the Center for uh, Cambridge International Research. So we
Mhm.
basically organize research opportunities for mostly high school students as a potential extracurricular that they would like to do, where they
Oh, okay.
can do a research project in a subject that they are interested in. And
Mhm.
we pair these students with university professors, and
Mhm.
they can either do a sort of one-on-one research mentorship project, or they could do a class almost with a few other students, but with only
Mhm.
like under 5 students. So it's a
Okay.
pretty
Okay.
cool, yeah, it's a pretty cool like university level sort of experience, and students who really have a keen interest in certain
Mhm.
subjects that they can't learn about in high school in their
Yeah.
respective schools are able to have that experience with us through our
Mhm.
programs. Yeah,
That's
so
cool. How
yeah,
many
so that
students do you
is
guys have right now?
uh we usually get around I need to check the numbers actually, but I want to say that this year we got around 300 applications and we admit less than that. But I should send you the real numbers like when I
Okay.
have them written down. Yeah, because we our
Sure.
sort of admissions team, I don't work on the admission side of things, so I'm
Okay.
a little less clear on the exact numbers there. Yeah.
Okay. All
But
right.
I will
No
send that
problem.
to you afterwards. Yeah.
Okay.
Um,
Sounds good.
and the podcast that we have that you are on right now is the
Mhm.
future of higher education, which is one of
Mhm.
the sort of education initiatives that we have as an
Mhm.
organization because we think it is super important to also be giving very useful information to the students who just happen to be in our
Yeah.
program.
Yeah.
And yeah, so usually these podcasts are uploaded onto YouTube as like a full episode. And
Okay.
also we put snippets onto our Instagram page
Okay.
to
Oh, that's
yeah, to
cool.
just give a little bit of insight onto into that kind of stuff. Because we obviously
Sure.
get so many questions, but
Yeah.
we don't have all of the answers.
Of
So
course. Yeah.
yeah, so we
No one
are
does, so don't worry. I feel
definitely
like it's such a black box.
it definitely is. Yeah, and as I said in my email, what we really want to talk to you about today is just the sort of your general sort of thoughts and opinion on um, the state of college admissions as because it's
Mhm.
always changing, and
Yeah.
obviously past few years there have been so many changes around the world that have greatly influenced the college admission space. And
Mhm.
specifically, we want to
Mhm.
chat about the sort of move towards test optional
Yeah.
admissions by a lot of universities and colleges in the US. And I did read your bio and saw that you also have done work in Canada and stuff like that, right?
Yes,
So,
correct.
okay. So we do actually have a lot of international students as
Okay.
who like, yeah, are in our sort of podcast. A lot of them are from all over the world. Some of them
Mhm.
are a lot of them want to go to schools in the US, but also look at other schools. So if you even have any thoughts or insights there, that would be helpful
Sure.
too.
Sure.
Um, yeah, so I think to start off the conversation, I'd love to hear a little bit
Mhm.
more about you, if you want to
Sure.
just give us a bit of an intro.
Sure, of course. So, as you know, my name's Claire, and I've been in admissions, well, in higher education for about 15 plus years. I've worked at you know community colleges. I worked at the University of Toronto, Rotman School of Management, in Canada when I was over there. I did MBA, recruitment and admissions, but I had the undergrad portfolio as well when I was at the university. And then here we moved to the US for family reasons, and I started working at Columbia. And my job was really interesting because I was a liaison between the undergrad admissions department and the alumni relations team, because I was the head of the interviewing program. So, as you know, Ivy Leagues especially, they would like to connect with the students before making a decision. And Columbia was one of them who had an interviewing program. And my job there was to work with the admissions team to understand what kind of students they're looking for and how we can support them through the interviewing program. So after spending close to 10 years at universities, I moved to the consulting space. It was a very interesting experience because it was very different, I found, working with the students. And as opposed to promoting one school, now I found myself, learning more about other programs, the nitty gritty and what they look for, and how I can help the students um, identify the right fit. Because more often than not, I'm sure you guys hear this all the time, fit, like even in graduate admission space, it's always about the fit. And students who wonder why they couldn't get into a certain program, they always think like, oh, my test score, my GPA. But most of the time, the student was just not the right fit for the school, and they miss that component. And with this testing optional policies becoming more prevalent, I'm actually very happy for the students. I'm going to get into the details of that. I don't want to answer all the questions in my intro, but yes. So since I believe 2018, yes, 2018, I've been in the consulting space. I do both graduate level and college level admissions. Well, for the last couple of years, more college admissions than grad admissions. But yeah, in a nutshell, that's who I am, and I am looking forward to this interview.
Amazing. That was so helpful and such a great intro.
Thank you.
Yeah, I guess to just get started into the sort of topic, what is
Mhm.
your opinion on standardized testing for the undergraduate, I guess college admissions? Yeah.
So standardized testing, for some people, it's an opportunity. For others, it can be um, a disadvantage because not everybody is a test taker. And to be clear, having a good test score could also be an indicator that the student worked with the right instructor and learned the test technique and, aced the test. Unfortunately, like we can't know that, and I don't like I never thought it was an indicator of a pretty much anything in college life, because if we want to see academic success, you have the transcript in front of you, and you can see the trend in the transcript much easier than at standards test, because they can take the test 3 times and then they can get 50-50 and that's it. But when you look at a transcript, you see the progression of the student and how they actually stretch themselves out of the comfort zone, because you can prep for a test for a month, but then when you look at the transcript, years of work, what kind of courses they've taken, and if they've done anything outside of the academic calendar of the school. So in my mind, tests was never a big uh, factor in the decision making, because as I said, if you want to see, if you want to predict academic success, I would rely on the transcript more than I would rely on a test score. But was that all the question? I'm sorry, I keep talking and then I forget the question.
No, no worries at all. I think you definitely answered it. But going off of that, I also so obviously in like when people are looking up what is the real impact of applying test optional, as a student who might be trying to understand what that actually entails for them, there are
Mm-hmm.
a lot of articles that mention that you need to be like focusing on your extracurriculars and things
Mm-hmm.
like that. 'Cause you mentioned your transcript here, and let's say
Mm-hmm.
maybe I'm a senior and I'm at the no, maybe not a senior, but maybe I had
Mm-hmm.
bad grades for like my first 2 years of high school or something.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I'm really worried that my transcript is not at the
Mm-hmm.
place where it needs to be for the
Mm-hmm.
places I want to go to.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, do you, what is your advice from this sort of more extracurricular standpoint? Do you feel like there is more of a focus there now for when admission officers are looking at students' applications?
Mm-hmm.
And if
Mm-hmm.
so, how do you feel like it affects students, maybe how they affects different types of students depending on their
Yeah.
backgrounds? Yeah.
A great question. This is really a fantastic question because a lot of students struggle with this.
Mhm.
Now, here's my advice to all of my students, and I'm going to share it here. Um, I think a holistic application is always way better than having just one grade test score. So I see your point. Like students are always concerned if their grades were not that good in grade 9, 10, and then they have only so much time to make up for it. But grade 11 is a big year. I would say even if they did not do a good job with grade wise, but if they had lots of extracurriculars, maybe that could be the reason. But again, I mean, having bad grades is hard to make up for. But at the end of the day, it tells about the students' priorities as well. So the way they position themselves, and if the extracurriculars are focused, not just an hour here, an hour there, but maybe they were working on a research project, and because of that, maybe the grades were not as high as they wanted them to be. That could, work to their advantage. It all depends on what type of extracurricular activities they pursued. But I do think that this is an opportunity for a lot of students who would not want to apply to a school where they would do a fantastic job, but they would think, oh, their average SAT is 1550. I'm nowhere close. But maybe they've done so much research, or maybe they've done like great things that would make them a good fit for that program. So I think extracurricular activities play a larger role than a lot of people think, but they have to be strategic about their activities. This is not about filling up those 10 spots on the application. It's about showing the admissions officers what they're passionate about and how they manage their time. Because at the end of the day, yes, we want to see a well rounded applicant, but at the same time, good time management. So when I speak with a student who seems to spread himself or herself quite thin, that's my number one advice to them. Okay, let's narrow this down, because it doesn't matter if you have 10 or if you have 5 activities, it's the quality of the activities. So my advice to those kids who think like, okay, I have bad grades, also the trend is important. If the trend is going in the right direction, in a positive direction, they can get away with it, because that will show the admissions officer that, okay, I've started taking my grades more seriously, this is important to me, and this is how I'm managing my time. It's not just I'm not a lazy student, but it was a learning curve for me. Now I know what I want. These are the activities I'm pursuing, and this is why I want to study at your school. So there's definitely lots of ways to position, but at the end of the day, it's going to come down to choosing the right activities for the personality. I feel like sometimes students would also choose activities that they think sound so fancy. Um, Maybe they do, who knows? But again, it gives away, because when we look at the activities, we'll be like, wait a minute, why would you want to do this? It's got nothing to do with the rest of the application. Why is this activity up here? Clearly to impress. Um, Maybe it's a good thing depending on, again, how much involvement the student has shown, but more often than not, the activities list would be so diverse that it would be hard for us to understand what the student really wants. So I think that there should be a solid strategy behind putting together the application, not just
Definitely.
what the admissions officers want to see, because they don't know what we want to see.
Hmm.
And to be honest with you, every year we get different applicants, so the pool is different. It's not that black and white, unfortunately. I wish it was, then it would be much easier for a lot of people, but there's really a little bit of secret formula. How do we make this application more attractive? And that's
Hmm.
where I guess we come into play, like as counselors, and even the guidance counselors at their high schools. They should seek help and come up with a good list.
Mm. And I think that's so interesting because uh, I know that when I was applying to college, there was such a emphasis, I feel like, to impress through the application, right? I mean, it kind of feels like
Hmm.
that's what you are supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
And I will definitely say that for myself and also my friends around me, there was so much pressure from, I want to say, like, from a parent's side, to join those sort of organizations that are just there to
Hmm.
impress, or to be a
Hmm.
part of those things that,
I know.
maybe they heard from another parent that you have to put it on in order
Yes.
to get into X school, right?
Yes.
And I mean, I think, the topic of the fact, that students are so young when they're applying to college is its own thing.
Yes.
Um, and unfortunately, there is, like, I remember after I probably was in college for like 2 or 3 years, I
Mhm.
realized how much how many things I would have done differently for my
Yeah.
college application,
Mhm.
uh just if I was just like a few years older or something, or I had the experience that I had gained since then.
Oh, I
um
hear you. Yeah.
yeah, I actually would, I mean, the easy question here is, like, how do you deal with that as a student? But I think what might be more interesting, is to hear from your perspective as a college counselor. Like, um, you obviously deal with parents and students, uh,
Hmm.
and usually, how does that go? Like, when you're advising parents and
Hmm.
students, what you're saying now, which is like, it's not about the impressive organizations, but actually the
Hmm.
consistency, and the time management and the holistic picture and narrative that makes sense. How is that usually received?
Ooh, okay. How is that received? That's a loaded question. Sometimes very well received,
Okay.
and sometimes not so very well received. So here's the thing. You're spot on. Part of my job is really managing parents' expectations. And
Mhm.
unfortunately, we live in a day and age, the social media has clear benefits, but at the same time, it can definitely destroy a person's perspective easily because, there's always these books and articles published saying, like, oh, the essay that's going to get into Harvard School. And they read it and they're like, oh, okay, this is what we're going to do. But most of the time, what they don't realize, yes, that essay played a very large role, but there is more to it. Again, we're going back to the course load. We're going back to the extracurricular activities, the volunteer work, if any, internships, if any. So there's definitely a lot more. And what I do when I read an essay that I feel like it's not going to be a powerful one, I always start with I tie it back to the student. Look, this is a good essay, but I have not learned anything about you. Because that's what we want to do. When we read an essay, otherwise we would just pick up the book and read it. So when we read an essay, we want to get to know the student, what really excites the student, and how they determined that that was something they're interested in, and the emotions, the feelings. Even if it's a failure, it's completely fine. Being vulnerable is not a weakness. And most of the time, students want to write about a success story, we try to understand, because even in a job interview we go and we talk about only the success, right? I do understand that, but at the end of the day, if the example, if the story they're telling is not about them, it's not going to go anywhere. And with the parents, it's the same thing. I always explain it to them, and you're so right, because their reaction is, well, but I see that this college is looking for these. Yes, but like, is that really your child? Is he passionate about these activities when he's doing them? And also, most of the time, the quality of the activities tell, because I can see that the students spent only 30 minutes a week on a project that really sounds impressive, but at the same time, he wasn't involved at all. He was not interested. So, like giving them examples and trying to um, almost like detach them from what they've read on social media and giving them the real deal. This is your child. This is the application we're going to put together. And our responsibility is to introduce the student to the best of our abilities. And this is our opportunity. We can't miss this, because putting together a vague essay is detrimental to the success of the application, because I'm sure you guys would know these numbers, at a typical top tier university or Ivy Leagues, they have 7 to 10 minutes to really go over an application because of the sheer volume, and the volume's increasing every year. So our job is to make sure what we put in front of them is what we want them to know about the student, aside from the grades, aside from anything else. So it's a long process, but most of the time I manage to get people on board, because basically, if I'm not impressed when I'm reading it, when I wear my admissions hat, chances are my colleague at X school will feel the same. So we try again. Most of the time, we're successful, but there are times where it's their application. We give them the facts, and we leave it there.
Definitely. I mean, it's such a difficult position, I think, for everyone involved, honestly.
Yes.
For the student, it's difficult because they are just trying to figure out the right thing to do. The parents,
Exactly.
it's
At a
difficult
young
because,
age, to
yeah, at
your
a young
point,
age,
at a very young
exactly.
age. No,
Yeah,
I
and for
totally
parents,
agree.
yeah, the parents are hearing a lot of things from a lot of places, as you're saying, and
Yeah,
also for you, obviously, you have
yeah.
the experience, but it is sometimes very hard to break through that, the
Mentality.
rumors and then the things that people are
Yeah,
saying, especially I think in such in a time where things have been so uncertain, especially
yeah,
for students and their ability to apply to colleges and take tests
yeah.
and and all of that. I mean, there's so much that has changed. Uh,
Yes,
it seems just like there's just so many factors that are really up against the situation at the moment.
for
And
sure.
yeah, and I guess on that topic, there has been a lot of change, and I have been like away from, I guess, the admissions part of the college admission stuff
Yeah,
for a
yeah.
while. So I haven't been very exposed to the, um, like what happened with students in COVID and things like that.
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm,
I do know about the fact that like MIT, for example, went test optional and then
mm-hmm.
decided to go back to
Yeah,
requiring standardized testing.
mm,
That is a lot of change and back and forth for students who are just
for
trying to
sure.
go to school. And yeah, I
I
think
know. Grade
with all of
11,
that,
they're like test
yeah,
optional. If it's the
mhm,
dream school, they're happy. And then, whoop, they change. And oh, okay, it's no longer test optional. So what do I do? Definitely, it's
exactly.
been yeah, a lot of pressure.
It's a lot of pressure, and I think uh you know I think things will inevitably change more. What do
Hmm.
you think what do you think will be happening in like the next few years from your perspective?
Yeah, yeah.
One, obviously, this move towards test optional admissions, like,
Hmm.
do you think more changes like that to make things more accessible and equitable
Hmm.
will happen? Or do you think that this is just a COVID situation and we might backtrack as some schools
Uh-huh.
already have?
Yeah.
Yeah, what are your thoughts?
So here's what I'm thinking, very genuinely. I think this was an opportunity for schools to experiment test optional. I'm going to be very bold and say this because for so many years, the tests have been a nightmare for admissions officers because whenever we had an event, we were only talking about test scores. And the message we wanted to convey was getting lost because nobody hears about fit. Nobody hears about student culture. I mean, they do, don't get me wrong, everybody listens, but then for some reason, the conversation always goes back to test scores. So let's talk about the tests. What kind of a score are you looking at? And to be honest with you, I can't promise anything. The student might have 1550 and may not get in, but a student with a lower score might get in because, again, that student might have the right extracurricular activities and, you know, the course load would be rigorous. I mean, relying on just one test score has always been a difficult conversation for counselors and admissions officers because, again, managing expectations, test scores. Like, I want them to do a draft, but the parent emails me, he has a test in 2 weeks. We're not going to do this. But this is also very important. It's not just about the test. So getting them to prioritize. Um, I think this is a good time to experiment this. I do think the colleges will need a little bit more data to understand if the test scores really were an indicator of anything because they haven't even graduated the first test optional cohorts, right? They haven't that, so they don't know what's going on. The first
Yeah.
year is always, I feel like in colleges, it's very dicey because, to your point, high school, and then all of a sudden they're in a very different environment. So first year has never been a good indicator of anything. But let's see how they do, how they progress. So ideally, I would love to see this test optional being a permanent thing. To be honest with you, because then it's more advantageous for students who don't have the resources to prep for a test to showcase their skills in different projects. It could be through work. Maybe they had to work part-time. Who knows? That speaks volumes about a student managing a part-time job and school. It's not easy. So that's that. Again, maybe they'll have a little bit more freedom to pursue the activities they actually enjoy because preparing for a test, and most of the time they take the test multiple times. So it's a big time commitment. I'm not even talking about energy, money, all those resources. It's a big time commitment. They don't have a lot of time to do the things they enjoy. For instance, nowadays, when I ask a student in our first meeting, I ask them about friends, I ask them about books they read, the answer is not very impressive. And most of the time, the colleges, when they interview, that's one of the questions, what do you do with your friends? What one student said to me, oh, I meet my friends at school and that's it, I don't have time. Is that really positive for the development of that child? Who knows? So I do think, and I hope this test optional continues. Some schools are backtracking. I don't know. MIT was a surprise to me. But I guess when you look at the core of MIT, maybe for them it makes sense because it's a very technical school, quant heavy courses. Maybe that was they feel more comfortable seeing a solid test score in their admissions process. But I think in the next few years, we're going to enjoy this freedom. And then once the first cohort graduates, I think that's the time the colleges will say, okay, let's look at this, let's evaluate, and then benchmark against the previous cohorts. But right now, I'm seeing more diverse applications, which is always a good thing because it's kind of, think about the admissions person reading hundreds of essays, always reading the same stuff. It gets really dull. But now I feel like different activities are being pursued, more volunteer work, different programs outside of school the students want to pursue. So I think the applications are richer, but ultimately it's the college's decision to bring it back or not. So, but right now I think this year we're good. We still have
Yeah.
quite a few great schools who are test optional, and I think we should enjoy that.
Yeah. That is so interesting because it almost sounds like the what you're describing here is that the move to test optional is almost making students have to focus a little more on like developing who they are, kind of, even if that's just through
Yes.
their college application. Because you mentioned the more diverse sort of essays and
Yeah.
activities and things like that. And
Yeah.
it feels like a move in the right direction because everyone says like college admissions becomes more and more difficult every year. And
Very
it's
competitive.
yeah, and I feel like that makes people um put their energy in the wrong places, the places where they have heard and they I need to do this
Yeah.
or else I
Yeah.
won't get in. So
Exactly.
yeah, it sounds like we are moving in a direction where the focus is being kind of put back into the right places, and it's like if you fill in all 10 of the activities on the
Hmm.
common app, that it's not actually seen as impressive because you probably are just filling in the spaces as much as you can.
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
yeah, and I guess I'm uh that's like it's a very I feel optimistic about it, and uh but
Me
I do
too.
also wonder how much will that like like will that persist, I guess, like will that continue, um because in the end it is getting more and more competitive, so there
Hmm.
is that element. And you know are we going to see that sort of transformation, I guess, like yeah, into that direction.
That's an excellent way of looking at it. I think the competition is moving in the right direction. In the past, it was more, I felt like, I mean, never from an admissions officer perspective, but from the applicant pool, parents, and the kids, there was way too much emphasis on tests, and APs and stuff like that. There was just way too much emphasis on the academics and the applications. The successful applications were the ones that were diverse. And unfortunately, as I mentioned earlier, um, most of the kids who didn't have the test score didn't feel comfortable applying uh, to an ED school because they were almost certain that because they didn't have the test score, they weren't going to get, they had no chance. So why would I, waste that opportunity? I do think this situation's allowing the colleges to see the real student, and also I think it's fair to the students because we're talking about really young minds here. So it's a good opportunity for them to try out different things and see what they're passionate about. Whereas in the past, maybe they didn't have enough time, and because they were so stressed. And also think about it, not just time, they were stressed. If they didn't get a good score, they have to prep again. They have to study even harder. There goes another month, another 2 months. So, and then they look at it, it's September. Now they have to work on their essays and everything. So they have the summer's gone pretty much. They couldn't do anything meaningful because they were so busy preparing for the test. So I'm hoping both parents and students will take advantage of this and invest in the right projects. It could be anything. It could be even completing a summer program at a school. It could be anything, but something that's going to learn and grow. And I'm hoping the quality of the applications will increase and the colleges will see more successful students because they're now able to determine fit a little bit better, because they're seeing more diverse applicant pools. So they might have the opportunity to admit um, different backgrounds, different, coming from different areas of the world because people have more flexibility to apply now. So I'm hoping that's going to be a positive sign for the colleges to continue this trend because they'll see, oh, our students are actually happier. There's less dropouts, or the grades are going well. The culture is very good. The culture that we want to foster, we're developing that culture. So maybe they'll be able to find a better fit for their programs because it's a win-win situation. If the students are happy my alumni relations hat comes into place here. If the students are happy, the chances are they're going to stay connected with the school more, because I feel like the alma mater culture in the United States is very strong. Students don't want to just sever ties the moment they graduate. Maybe other countries they experience that, but not necessarily here. I feel like there's a big connection. So when you have these happy students who, who will be successful, then the schools will benefit more. It's really a really big picture we're talking about. We're talking about years of commitment from a student's perspective. So, and the colleges are smart. They'll figure this out. So I'm
Mhm.
excited about this. This is really, I might be a little bit too optimistic about everything. That's generally who I am. But I do feel like students feel less pressure. They can write about anything now, or they can pursue a volunteer job they couldn't in the past. Maybe they didn't have the time. So
Definitely.
we'll see.
And you've already answered part of my next question,
Mhm.
which is great. And the question was going to be what kind of change you want to see in the college
Yeah.
admission space.
Yeah.
So you have spoken a bit about the uh, just students being able to do a bit more of what they want, and sort of the end goal being that
Yeah.
long-term relationship with the college and university,
Hmm.
not just
Hmm.
getting in, right? So I guess
Exactly.
in that same vein, we have seen this change of test optional becoming more common. Outside of that, what other changes do you hope to see in the college admission space that will maybe gear everyone towards
Yeah.
this, yeah, more optimistic future that you have spoken about?
I would love to see more emphasis on fit. Even now, there's like when I talk about students, when we put together student school lists, I'm sorry, there is still a very big emphasis on rankings, especially from international student perspectives. And I totally get that. This is a big investment. I completely understand. I mean, if they're traveling all the way uh, from wherever across the pond, they want to go to a great school. I respect that. Like, I respect that. I get that. But at the same time, that great school is a relative concept. Great to who? If it's just great on the rankings, then it really doesn't tell me much about the student's success. And that's one thing I always talk about with the parents who are resistant to think about any school outside of the top 20. I mean, we're talking about top 20, not even top 50 here. Like, there are fantastic schools out of the top 20, but people are fixated. So that's something from an applicant perspective I would love to see um, a shift. I mean, rankings are a good starting point. If you don't know anything about the college landscape in the US, checking the rankings is a good idea, because you'll learn which schools, what they do, and where they're located, etc. But that's something that I'm very sensitive about, because most of the time students select schools that's got nothing to do with them. They don't even offer the major they're looking for. And when I share this, they're shocked. But it's like, in top 5. Well, it doesn't matter. Every school has a different strength, like you do. You have different strengths. And sometimes there's no match. And chances are your chances to get in, less than 1%, given the situation. So what do we do? So that's the biggest change I would love to see in this space. I mean, colleges, I think they're doing a fair job of promoting their programs and communicating what they're looking for in a student. When you look at the websites, a fantastic job of promoting the culture and everything. It's just a matter of teaching the students how to do a proper research. What should you be looking for in a college? I think they need that guidance more than anything, because they're young. They don't know. They hear things, and then there's always this pressure. Oh, my uncle went to MIT, so it runs in the family. Okay, does it? Do we know? How do we know? It doesn't work that way, unfortunately. So that's the biggest change I would like to see. I'm as I said, I'm very happy with the test optional direction, but I think we need a little bit more work on that front. Less emphasis on the rankings. Use it as a starting point, and then build on your list. Come up with a list of questions. This is an exercise I do with my students. I ask them questions like, what kind of climate do you enjoy? What do you like about your hometown? What do you dislike about your hometown? So that I try to give them you know, a realistic picture of the schools they pick and where they're located. Even like these things, the physical aspects, sometimes it's an eye opener because they realize, oh, that place is so cold. I can't do that. See, then you're not going to be happy. Are you going to be miserable for 4 years? 4 years is a very long time. Do you want to be miserable for 4 years? And then, you know, we start looking at other schools and then see, and also the culture goes hand in hand. Um, so I think that's the biggest change.
Mhm.
And that's the biggest struggle on a number of levels for both admissions officers and counselors, because we always talk about it, but at the end of the day, rankings always win. Mm,
Yeah. And do you think in the past few years, or in the most recent cohorts of students, they have become uh, more or less like sort of focused on the rankings? Like, have you seen a change in there anywhere? Because I know when I was applying, it was just so important.
mhm,
And I know that I still hear conversations about it. But it seems like people do also talk about the fact that there are flaws
mhm.
in those top sort of Ivy sort of type spaces.
Yeah.
Uh, have you seen a change at all?
A little bit, not as big as I would love to see. I mean, there are now I'm meeting with students who are more mature and they take ownership of their application process. And because the student is so mature, the parents feel comfortable,
Mhm.
you know, giving the reins. But there is still a very big emphasis from international students. And these students could be anywhere in the world, by the way. We're not just talking about Asia or you know, the Middle East or I have a student in the UK who is fixated on rankings. It's like if I'm leaving London, if I'm coming all the way there, this is the school I want to be. But
Mhm.
you don't have the profile. You know, that's a minor inconvenience. You don't have the profile. How are you going to go to that school just because it ranks well? You know, you're not going to be happy. Um, no, I think I'm gonna take it back to the extracurriculars. Like the students, I feel like the students who are involved outside of school are more mature. And because they've done so much outside of school, they've experienced different relationships, and they have developed a different perspective. So I feel like those are the applicants where you'll hear, you know what, yes, I get it, but this school seems like I like this campus environment a little bit better. Or they would say, like, you know what, I have to be in the city. I can't do in a school, no matter how great the school is, out in the boonies in a giant campus. I can't do that. It's not for me. And I respect that. And I love that because at least we're 50% there. We know where we're going to look, what kind of schools we're going to look at. And the other thing, a personal, well, I mean, professional slash personal example, um, because I worked at Columbia, it's a city school. I get this question all the time from students. I like, oh, I'm interested in Columbia. And most of the time that's why they select me as a counselor. I'm like, why Columbia? What is it that you love about Columbia? We've been talking about Columbia for 20 minutes. And you know, most of the time they get it right. They're like, it's a city school. I love the city environment. I like the core. You know, they've done their research. They know something about the program. They know that that's the flagship of the program, and that's a great starting point because from a grade 11 rising a senior, that's all I expect. I don't expect them to come to me with a full-on spreadsheet knowing everything. Then I would be irrelevant in their lives. So like it is changing, but not as fast as I would love. But I guess any progress is good progress, so I'll take it.
Definitely. And I must agree with you on the climate sort of question, because I went to Reed College, which is in Portland, Oregon, and that is a very rainy place. And I guess, you know, it's one thing to like for someone to be like, oh yeah, it's like rainy here, and then it's another thing to live there for 4 years and see how it impacts you. So those questions are very, very important. And other places I was considering for example, we're in like Rochester and in New York, and that would have
Yeah.
been so different. I did not grow up in a place like that. So
Yeah.
uh yeah, those are
It's a
all
huge
such
change.
a huge
It's a
change.
big change.
And 4 years is a long time. And I think people
Exactly.
don't think about that enough. Like there is the good schools in your mind and the highly ranked schools, but there's also places that you will probably just be happier in. And that is
Exactly.
way more important. Like once you get to college, you really realize that you're like, okay, like
Yeah.
I really need to like be able to live here. And I guess
4
it's also
years we're talking about. It's
four
not
years
like,
exactly.
if it was a 3-month program, who cares? You can do it. Just grab an umbrella. You're going to be happy. But for 4 years living in that climate, it's like for some students that's goes hand in hand with retention because
Yes.
they can't survive, and then the parents need to move there. Like it's a whole host of other problems.
Mhm.
And also this country is so big. Like think about Canada, think about the US, giant country with like different climates, and people don't realize sometimes. um but
Yeah.
yeah, your example is spot on. Portland
Yeah.
being so rainy, and you're like, oh, what happened here? How did you
Exactly.
survive? What did you do? Give us some strategies. Maybe I can share
Well,
with my students.
I gotta say, a lot of my friends had like those sunlights, like they would get those like fluorescent light thingies that are supposed
Yeah.
to give you like a dose of like vitamin D or something, and people would take
Oh,
vitamin
okay.
D. Like they were very
Yeah.
creative. I did not do that. But yeah, I mean, there's so many great things about the Portland area. What comes with the rain is just beautiful greenery.
Yeah,
So, and
for
like
sure.
yeah, the fall is like beautiful.
Yeah.
So there were a lot of perks as well. But it
Yeah.
was definitely a big change. And obviously like change is inevitable when you're going
Mhm.
to college. But I think what you're
Mhm.
saying about fit is so important. We overlook things like that. I think especially when we are when we're told that this is like the biggest sort of
Mhm.
decision part of your life that you have to figure out. And yeah, like those things are so important. Even like the
Yeah.
sort of personality type of the school, does it fit with
Mhm.
yours? Those things are
Yeah.
key because if you're in a place that doesn't feel like comfortable for yourself, like it really
Yeah.
like students leave, like they just don't like it and
Exactly.
they are
It's
out.
hard mentally because it's a big change. You're leaving your hometown. You're leaving your parents. You're moving to a totally different environment. And also
Mhm.
think about the student body. Like, if you're not the right fit, chances are the student body will not be interesting to you either because you're going to be with lots of different people, and that's going to impact your morale. Like
Yeah,
wake up early in the morning, go to school. If you don't like it, it's a big commitment, and at such a young age, they don't need that kind of stress in their lives, I feel.
yeah,
Mhm.
it is. Yeah, and I'm in agreement with so many things you've said today. Is
Awesome.
there any last pieces of advice you want to give to the students before we wrap up?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for the opportunity. This was a
Yes.
great conversation. I loved it. I think my biggest advice is, definitely don't forget to read some books that are not academic. Please pay attention to what you're reading. Try to get your mind off of things. Sports is big. The physical activity, that component, definitely try to make it a habit, a couple times a week. I know, like because of the competitiveness of the admissions landscape, these kids don't have any time for anything. But if you're able to even listen to a podcast or something on your way to school, instead of, if it's walkable, if the weather is nice, get your exercise like that. Because I feel like they have to be mentally fresh to start writing a personal statement. A
Mm,
tired mind will not take you very far. So my advice is, yes, of course, you've done so much up until now, but trust me, like that's all you've done, and now it's time to focus on different things. And don't worry too much about test scores and stuff like that. Just research, do your research, ask questions. And also one more thing I want to say, on YouTube there are so many students
Mhm.
recording their experiences, and I think it's a very valuable free resource for students to hear from them. That's going to give you an idea who your roommate could be at the dorm, or your classmates, your teammates. So sometimes research is not pen and paper. I know some parents were like, one parent was like, "Did you tell him to watch YouTube videos?" I'm like, okay, let me just specify that, not any YouTube video. This is what I said. And she's like, "Oh, okay, that makes a lot of sense," because they overhear the conversation, right? They're like, "What? What did you just say?" What I mean, not any YouTube video, the ones that are relevant to your research. And other than that, take it easy, be yourself in the personal statement, who you are. That's what we're after. We're not after a chronological order of what you've done in your life, because we have the resume, the activities list, and everything. Like, who are you? Give us all the feelings, or use as many adjectives as possible. That would be my final thoughts on admissions. And again, I thank you for the opportunity. It was great
Thank
meeting you.
you. Yes, it was great meeting you too. And I must say that I agree with the YouTube part as well. We were doing a project at some
Such a great
point in the
resource.
organization. Yeah, and I watched some of those YouTube videos that the students were making
Hmm.
at various schools, and they are
Yeah.
so helpful if you are trying to
Yes.
even study what that student is studying, or like just kind of get a feel of what college is like.
Exactly.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's so wonderful that it exists now. So yeah,
Yeah.
really glad that
Awesome.
you mentioned that. Anyway,
Awesome. My pleasure.
thank you for your time, Claire. It
Thank
was
you.
such a pleasure. And
Likewise.
I hope you have a great rest of your day. And yeah, I will
Thank
send you some
you.
more information on CCIR as well
Okay.
after. So I'll get that to you. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so
Cool.
much.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Bye.
Bye bye. Enjoy the rest of the
Care.
day.
You too.